I'm here at the European Development Days in Brussels, and with me is Amina Mohamed, the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Environmental Program. Amina, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell me, you are working a lot right now on the green economy. What is that really, and why that term? What is different in what we're talking about today?
Well, first of all, let me begin by saying that, in fact, the world has embraced the whole concept of the green economy. This happened at Rio in June, and now it's almost full speed ahead. And basically what the green economy is about is low carbon growth, resource efficiency, inclusion, right, in economic growth, the whole idea of injecting equity, right, into development, ensuring that you reduce the environmental risks, and also reduce ecological scarcities, so that we have growth, because nobody, I think, has any interest in slowing down growth in any way, form or shape. But the idea is to make sure that that growth is actually sustainable, right? That it's growth that will benefit us today, right? And will also be able to benefit future generations. I think this whole cliche about borrowing the earth from our children and not inheriting it from our parents is correct in terms of what the green economy is intended to achieve.
At Rio in June, at the UN Sustainable Development Summit, there was the first steps being made on a sustainable development agenda, which would be a global agenda. Is that really realistic to get that pushed through when China, the United States, when other countries have huge reservations over climate change targets and other types of measures?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's possible. The green economy was actually recognized as one of the important tools to achieve sustainable development. And why this happened was because, in reality, in many of the countries that embraced this concept, the green economy is already happening. Countries are already transitioning to a green economy, and whatever reservations China may have, it has already embraced the green economy. If you just talk about the 1.5 million jobs that have been created in the renewable energy sector in China, and the fact that, you know, by committing to renewable energy, they're actually already reducing their footprint. If you looked at countries across the globe, from Peru, right, to Kenya, to South Africa, Tanzania, all these countries, Brazil, have embraced the green economy in some form or shape. In Brazil, you have sustainable urban cities, and there's a concrete example of cities where, in fact, the green space that's available to every inhabitant of a city has increased from 1 kilometer to 50 kilometers, right? In places like Kenya, where they have embraced geothermal, right, wind and solar. In Germany, where already 25% of all household energy is derived from renewables. To Rwanda, where the restoration of ecosystems, right, has taken a huge leap forward. Restoration of wetlands, you know, basically the protection and conservation of the mountain gorilla, right? And why are these taking shape? Because I think there is a realization, a recognition that, in fact, by doing so, right, jobs are created, right? Economies are built, growth is ensured, right? And where there was actually you know, slowdown in growth in some cases, you know, you actually see a surge, right? Just based on the notion of embracing new ways, right? New ways of doing things, new cultures, new patterns, and new technology, obviously. Yeah. So it's a reality. It's happening already. In some cases, it would be slow. Even in countries that were totally skeptical in Rio, we have received requests for capacity building, right? For knowledge sharing, for transfer of expertise, right? So there is interest. I think that there is realization after Rio, and after some of the governments that were present there testified to what successes they were having with this transition to the green economy. Maybe not even calling it the green economy, but just talking about the sectors, right, where they've been experiencing changes, growth, a difference, the creation of jobs, right. I don't know whether you know about the report that we launched with the ILO on green jobs that basically talks about the possibility of creating millions of jobs. And when you look at the example of China, where 1.5 million jobs have already been created, then that does not seem too far-fetched. It actually seems possible that this can be done in other countries as well.
Many of the countries that you mentioned are either industrialized countries or emerging economies. So what is the potential here, though, in countries that are developing, that are relatively poor, countries across Africa, countries maybe in South America?
Well, I'll give you examples of Kenya, I'll give you examples of Peru, Rwanda. Those are poor countries. In fact, I believe that for poor countries, it's actually much easier to embrace new technology, than for old economies, where there's already a pattern, a culture, right, of using old technology that has already been established. But for these countries, I mean, any possibility of leapfrogging. And if you looked at the telephone industry, telephony, you said you spent a little time in Kenya, and what the mobile phone has done, basically for development and growth, in Kenya, it's phenomenal, right? It actually made it possible for us to develop our own technology, right? M-Pesa, I think you've heard of it, right? The transfer of money through, yeah. So basically, that's what it does. In countries where there's less development, right, you see that any opportunity is seized, right, to try and push themselves forward. And there's the possibility that they can actually leapfrog, right, because they have not developed the bad habits, right? They have developed some bad habits, but not the whole, if you like, the whole set of bad habits, if you could put it that way. And so it's possible for them to make these changes with some pain, but not as much pain as the more developed countries where, entrenched habits, entrenched culture, and the expectation, that life would continue as it has always been, right, with some patterns of consumption and production that obviously do more harm than good.
What then do these countries need? I suppose they need technology transfer. You mentioned that they need capacity building, they need foreign aid. All of those are issues that since Copenhagen, when briefly, of course, the African delegation walked out of negotiations, that have been sticking stones here. Could you go into more details on exactly what type of technical assistance, what type of capacity, what type of technology do those countries need, and how do we get it to them?
Some of that is already available through UNEP and through other UN and international agencies, right? So we have capacity that we could share. We have expertise that we could transfer. When it comes to technology, obviously it's a totally different matter, and probably that's why you find some reluctance, right, in some quarters to embrace this whole concept of the green economy, because there's still that lingering, question of where will the resources actually come from, right, to support this transition to a green economy. So basically, I mean, one of the reasons why we are also here is to encourage development partners to look at projects that actually are meaningful for the environment as well, right, and support those projects. But also at the UN, they're going to be discussing, financing instruments, right, and so to just encourage everybody to participate as fully as possible in those. We also had a trio, commitments that were made. There's a whole annex to the declaration, commitments that were undertaken by international financial institutions, by international organizations, by governments, by, some communities as well, basically saying that if a country decides and takes that step, right, to transition to a green economy, that there will be support available, right, for them to embark on that journey. And so we are all, hoping that this can happen sooner rather than later, so that countries are much more encouraged to embark on this journey. And again, we have already started providing capacity building. In fact, at Rio, we already started our bilaterals with governments to see in which way we could be supportive. As you know, we were maybe the big part of the world that actually developed this concept of the green economy, and so we have some expertise that we can actually share. And we also launched a program for action on the green economy, and had governments participate, including governments from Europe, some from Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Just see how we can all join hands to make sure that this happens.
I wanted to ask you about financing. You mentioned that, and of course the UN Environmental Program is not the richest agency in the world, so talk a little bit more about the commitments that you're getting from bilateral donors, from the World Bank, from other big organizations and funders, and how far that really can go. How much do you think we still need? Where are we at?
Yeah, it's true. We are not rich in terms of resources, but in terms of just the capacity and the expertise, right? And the science that is actually needed to provide support to countries, I think we are quite rich. But in terms of resources, and it's true that these countries will need resources to embark on this transition to a green economy. On that, we're going to rely on our development partners. We're going to rely on international financial institutions. We're going to be asking that as they move forward, because we all took upon ourselves a commitment to actually integrate, right, the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. We all agreed that we are going to move towards sustainable development, and therefore we would like also to see what kind of commitments they will be making towards that end, so that it does not become business as usual, right, supporting any types of projects, right, at the expense of projects that would actually reduce our ecological, if you like, footprint. Yeah? So we'll be encouraging governments and others to just stick to their commitments that we need to integrate these dimensions of sustainable development, and to that end that we will be, as we support development in the third world, as we support growth in developing countries, as they embark on their transition to a green economy, that we support those projects that will actually contribute significantly. Renewable energy projects, sustainable cities projects, sustainable transport projects, sustainable tourism projects, right? Projects that actually are meaningful both in terms of economic growth, but also environmental sustainability.
And briefly, when you talk about new innovative financing mechanism, give us a glimpse at what is on the table right now when it comes to new financing mechanisms.
Well, I think that many of those are going to be negotiated in New York during this coming session of the General Assembly, and therefore I wouldn't like to preempt the negotiations. But obviously, what it just means is that it will be different from what exists today, right? Hopefully, it will be additional, right? And where it is not, at least we hope that it will be better targeted, right, towards projects that are supportive of achieving sustainable development.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll hear much more about this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thanks for watching. Stay tuned to Devex.